Before acupuncture became one of the most recognized parts of traditional Chinese medicine, someone had to explain why a tiny needle could matter at all. Why would touching one point on the body affect another area? Why did ancient physicians talk about channels, qi, blood, timing, depth, and technique? And why did they believe the body was connected by pathways of movement and response? One of the most important texts behind those questions is the Lingshu, often translated as the spiritual pivot. It is one of the two major parts of the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's inner classic. If the Suwen is the part that asks the big theoretical questions, then the Lingshu moves closer to practice. It is especially connected with acupuncture, channels, needling methods, and the movement of qi through the body. But the Lingshu is not just an old acupuncture manual. It is not a book of magic points. And it is not a promise that needles can solve every problem. It is a window into how ancient Chinese medicine tried to understand the body as a connected living system. The key question behind the Lingshu is simple. If the body is connected, where does that connection move? In modern anatomy, we think about nerves, blood vessels, muscles, organs, hormones, and tissues. The Lingshu came from a very different world. Ancient Chinese physicians did not have modern imaging or laboratory science, but they did have careful observation. They watched pain move. They watched temperature change. They watched pulse, skin, sensation, stiffness, weakness, breathing, and recovery. They noticed that the body did not always behave like separate pieces. A problem in one area could be related to another area. A change on the surface could reflect something deeper. The Lingshu became one of the great attempts to describe that connectedness through channels, points, qi, and needling. This is why the idea of channels is so central. In Chinese medicine, channels are not simply physical tubes like blood vessels. They are more like functional pathways, ways of describing how movement, influence, and response travel through the body. To modern ears, that can sound mysterious, but in the ancient context, it was a serious attempt to map relationships. If the Suwen asked, "What pattern is forming?" the Lingshu asked, "How does that pattern move through the body, and how can a physician respond?" That is why acupuncture became so important in this text. A needle was not treated as a random tool. It was a precise intervention that required location, timing, depth, direction, and judgment. The Lingshu repeatedly reminds us that technique matters. Needling was not supposed to be careless. It required knowing the person, the condition, the channel, the strength of the patient, and the purpose of the treatment. This is a major part of the Lingshu's message. The needle is small, but the thinking behind it is not small. One of the most famous themes connected with the Lingshu is the system of channels and points. The text helped shape the classical understanding of how channels link different parts of the body and how acupuncture points can be used within a broader medical pattern. But we should be careful here. The Lingshu should not be read as a modern do-it-yourself guide. It belongs to an ancient medical tradition and requires trained interpretation. Its importance today is cultural and historical. It shows how acupuncture was not just a set of folk techniques, but part of a larger theory of the body. The Lingshu also gives us a different way to think about medical skill. In many modern conversations, people focus only on the tool. They ask, "Does the needle work?" But the Lingshu would push the question deeper. Who is using the needle? What pattern are they responding to? What is the proper timing? What is the correct depth? What should be avoided? In other words, the Lingshu is not only about needles, it is about judgment. A careless physician may use the same method on everyone. A careful physician watches the person in front of them. This is one reason the text still matters in the history of medicine. It treats technique as something that must be guided by understanding. The name Lingshu is also interesting. It is often translated as spiritual pivot, numinous pivot, or miraculous pivot. The word pivot is important because it suggests a turning point, a central hinge, something that allows movement and transformation. That image fits the text. The Lingshu is about movement, qi moving, blood moving, illness moving, sensation moving, and treatment guiding movement. It is not only asking what the body is made of, it is asking how the body changes. This makes the Lingshu different from a simple anatomy book. It is trying to describe function, relationship, and flow. In the ancient Chinese medical imagination, life was not static. Health depended on proper movement. When movement was blocked, disturbed, weakened, or excessive, illness could appear. Acupuncture in this framework was one way to influence movement. Again, this should not be turned into a modern medical claim or a promise of results. But historically, it helps explain why the needle became such a powerful symbol in Chinese medicine. It represented the idea that small, precise action could affect a larger pattern. Another important feature of the Lingshu is that it connects surface and depth. A needle enters the surface of the body, but the goal is not only the skin. The text is interested in how the surface communicates with deeper functions. This is one reason acupuncture points became meaningful. They were understood as places where the physician could interact with the body's pathways. Whether we understand this through traditional theory or compare it carefully with modern anatomy, the historical idea is clear. The body has access points. The surface is not separate from the inside. This way of thinking gave Chinese medicine a very distinct style. It encouraged physicians to observe the visible body while thinking about hidden relationships. Skin color, pulse, sensation, pain, tension, and reaction were not isolated details. They were clues. The Lingshu also reflects the ancient belief that treatment must match the state of the person. It is not enough to know a point or a method. The physician must know when to use it, when not to use it, and how strongly to use it. This is one of the reasons ancient Chinese medical texts often sound cautious. They do not simply say, use this for that. They repeatedly emphasize difference, timing, and appropriateness. The patient may be strong or weak. The condition may be shallow or deep. The movement may be excessive or deficient. The illness may be new or long-standing. The Lingshu's world is a world of distinctions. That makes it harder than a simple list, but also more sophisticated as a medical culture. It teaches that treatment is not just action. Treatment is response. To understand the Lingshu, we also need to remember that it developed inside the larger world of the Huangdi Neijing. The Neijing is traditionally presented as a dialogue involving the Yellow Emperor and medical masters such as Qibo. This dialogue style gives the text authority, but it also shows how knowledge is explored through questioning. The Lingshu continues that spirit. It asks how channels work, how needling should be done, how the body's movements can be understood, and how a physician should think before acting. Like the Suin, it was shaped over time through transmission, editing, and interpretation. It should not be treated as the private notebook of one person. It is better understood as part of a long effort to organize ancient Chinese medical knowledge into a coherent tradition. That is why it became foundational. It gave acupuncture a classical language. It helped make needling part of a broader medical worldview instead of an isolated technique. This is especially important for English-speaking audiences, because acupuncture is often separated from its cultural background. Many people know the word acupuncture, but they do not know the world of ideas that surrounded it. They may imagine it as either mysterious magic or just a physical technique. The Lingshu shows that classical acupuncture was understood as neither random nor purely mechanical. It belonged to a system that connected the body, channels, qi, blood, organs, timing, symptoms, and a physician's judgment. Whether a modern viewer accepts the traditional framework or not, the historical fact is important. Acupuncture was not just about inserting needles. It was about reading the body. One of the strongest lessons of the Lingshu is precision. The text suggests that small differences matter. The location matters, the depth matters, the timing matters, the patient's condition matters, the intention of the treatment matters. That is a useful lesson even beyond acupuncture. In health, small things often matter because the body is sensitive to context. Sleep, stress, movement, food, emotion, age, and environment all change how a person responds. The Lingshu belongs to a tradition that took response seriously. It did not treat the body as one size fits all. It treated the body as dynamic. This is also why the Lingshu should be approached with respect and caution. It is a major historical medical text, but it is not a self-treatment manual. Acupuncture should be performed by qualified professionals, and serious symptoms should be evaluated by appropriate medical providers. Appreciating the Lingshu as a cultural classic does not mean turning it into internet medical advice. In fact, the deeper spirit of the text is carefulness. It values observation, training, timing, and judgment. So what did the Lingshu really give Chinese medicine? It gave acupuncture a foundation. It gave the channel system a classical voice. It gave physicians a way to think about the body as connected through movement and response. It showed that treatment is not just about tools, but about understanding when and how to use them. And it helped shape one of the most recognizable parts of traditional Chinese medicine for more than 2,000 years. In the end, the Lingshu is not important only because it talks about needles. It is important because it asks what a needle means inside a connected body. It asks how the surface speaks to the inside. It asks how movement becomes health or illness. It asks how a physician can act with precision instead of force. And if the Suwen teaches us to ask better questions, the Lingshu teaches us that small actions require deep understanding. The needle is tiny, but in the world of the Lingshu, it stands at the center of a much bigger idea. The body is connected, and real medicine begins by learning how those connections move.